Hi, this is Mary James with Passive House Accelerator. Thanks for tuning in to this special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast, recorded at PhiusCon 23 in Houston, Texas. A big thank you to Zola Windows for their support of the series. And welcome, Kathleen Narbonne, to the Passive House Accelerator podcast. Can you please introduce us, tell us who you work for, and give us just a little rundown of what you do?
Yep, my name is Kathleen Narbonne. I work at RDH Building Science. I'm based out of Toronto, but I'm sure we're friends with the Passive House Accelerator, who might all know that we have offices all over North America. And I've been at RDH for about 4 years, and I've been doing Passive House work for most of that time. I started off in energy modeling and soon afterwards became a Phius verifier, and then just recently became a Phius CPHC. But I'm doing Passive House work in both Phius and PHI programs. And then I have a background in architecture and enclosure, and so I'm doing some enclosure consulting on the side as well. Not on the side outside of RDH, but on the side of Passive House work.
Very interesting that you're doing both Phius and PHI work, because that must mean you're seeing quite a range of projects.
Yeah, I find that, we're agnostic to the certification standard. We will work in any sort of certification standard. We prefer to work on high performance buildings, just sort of blanket, which includes LEED. It can include our zero carbon building standard in Canada. Any sort of better than code, significantly better than code. But because I am working in both Passive House Institute and Phius projects, I have exposure to many more projects, and I get to learn the nuances between the two certification standards and learn on projects in one area that I can apply to the other. I just find that it well rounds my experience.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that you get to see approaches used for both types of projects. And I'm really curious, do you see a significant difference, or are they turning out to be similar approaches? And also, can you just tell us about, for instance, one Phius project that you've worked on recently?
Sure. We work mostly on multi-unit residential buildings, and I have a couple projects that are just finishing certification to Phius right now, and I'm working on another one that's pretty far along construction in the PHI standard. So all three of those ones are multifamily buildings. One of them is in Edmonton, and it's a smaller multifamily. It's stacked townhouses. There's 2 buildings, and they have 8 units each, so 16 total. And then one of my projects is in St. John, New Brunswick, and that one is a 6-story affordable multi-unit residential building. And that one has about 50 units. And then the Passive House Institute, the PHI one, is closer to home. It's just outside of Toronto, and it's a 9-story building, and it has 64 units. So those are kind of the projects we work on. We've also are wrapping up the largest Passive House building in Canada, I believe, and it's certifying to Passive House Institute. It's the University of Toronto new student residence campus in Scarborough. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Oh yes, that one's gotten a lot of attention because it's such a great example as a student residence, but also as a project that was a long time in the making, and the support that it got from the university to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and there was a lot. It was a brand new team to Passive House, and so we had to do a lot of coaching on that project. And so, yeah, there were a lot of struggles, but it's definitely coming to an end, and we hope to see it through.
And it's done construction.
It's done construction.
Occupied,
it's
right?
occupied. Students moved in at the end of August, beginning of September. And so we haven't heard much in terms of feedback yet from how it's being used. It's only been a couple months. And we are still wrapping up certification, documentation in the meantime. So,
and would you be involved in any commissioning with that building, or is that not a role that you undertake?
We were involved in that we review a lot of the commissioning. We did actually conduct the final airtightness test, which I led. So I was there doing the final testing with a bunch of RDHers.
And it did. Let's hear the results.
It had a final airtightness rating of 0.35 ACH ACH at 50 pascals. So that's the volumetric flow. But I mean, it's almost half of the target. So
right. Excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But as terms of all the other testing and commissioning, this is one of the big differences between Passive House Institute and Phius, is that Phius has this role of the verifier that will do the testing themselves, and the scope of work is outlined pretty clearly. And in the Passive House Institute, the Passive House designer will see through construction as well and do that documentation role, but there's no real requirement for us to do that commissioning part. And I mean, it's outside of my skills anyway, so the commissioning I didn't do aside from the airtightness test, but we were there to review reports, make sure that it has all the documentation required. And then we also, when we can, will touch base with those commissioning agents ahead of their work in order to make sure that they know what's required for certification.
Well, and Toronto is kind of a hotbed, or has become a hotbed of Passive House, it seems. It's just great to see Passive House spreading so that there aren't like two hotbeds now. It's really showing up. And it sounds like all the projects you've worked on that you just mentioned are new construction.
Yes.
Is that correct? But I know Toronto is trying to make an effort in retrofits as well. Are you involved in any retrofit projects?
We haven't seen retrofit Passive House projects in our office yet. There are lots of retrofit projects that our office is working on, but they more tend towards the other certification programs for whatever reason. So I personally haven't worked on very many, but I know that there are a lot going around. There's a lot coming up, and our office is huge advocates for deep energy retrofits, which again, we like to focus on the higher performance. There will be some in the near future, I'm sure.
Well, it's an exciting time to be working in high performance buildings, because it's not like you're out there begging for projects to get involved in, because there's a lot, right?
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, I feel fortunate that I can work on these high performance buildings like almost exclusively. It just really solidifies my beliefs in what we need to be doing, and the fact that I get to do it all the time is rewarding and great.
And just briefly speaking of Passive House spreading, the project in St. John's is probably one of the first Passive House projects there in that province, right?
So I think there's been quite a few projects in Nova Scotia and maybe a couple in New Brunswick. I would have to double check exactly. But I know that this building in particular has been getting a lot of publicity because I think it's so large. a lot of the projects that they've seen in Nova Scotia are single family or smaller multifamily buildings, mostly residential. I'm not sure that there's any that are non-residential. But yeah, it's definitely like a big thing for St. John and for the community. And it's in kind of a rough area of the city, and it was an empty parking lot, I believe, beforehand. It may have been something else prior to that. But everyone seems to be really excited about it. And, you know, the owner is committed to certifying as well. So we're, like I said before, we're just wrapping that up. And I think it'll be great for the community.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.